Welcome back to our next question and answer session with Father Stephen. I apologize once again. I know it's been a long time. We had Easter, Lent was kind of busy. I've been just very busy, and sometimes it takes a long time for me to prepare for some of these questions. So some of these questions are kind of in depth and difficult, but you will have an understanding of how far behind I am in answering these questions based on the next question. So here's the question. Hello, Father Stephen. I know Life Chain is coming up soon. Not sure if you will get this by then, but here's my question. If you have mental issues that ignite when pushed into pressure, that does happen sometimes at Life Chain, should one still go? If an individual who has been harmed by certain individuals in the past through bullying, etc., should that individual participate in Life Chain, knowing that they might see those individuals and there might be awkwardness and possibly retaliation for past offenses? Thanks, Father, for helping clarify thoughts. So, this question was asked last September, and our Life Chain is usually the first weekend or the last weekend of September or the first weekend of October. So yes, I am far behind, but it's worthwhile answering this question. So the question is basically regarding mental health issues and difficulty coping in certain situations, such as being bullied or harmed, or the potential for such things to happen. Let me begin by saying that there is no simple answer to this question. It's not just a one answer fits all kind of situation. So we need to consider a number of different things. For example, the extent of the mental health issues the person has. Some people have more issues or more extreme issues than others. But we also need to consider the extent of the adverse reaction or the possible extent of an adverse reaction. In other words, some people may have very extreme mental health issues, but they may be fairly good at coping. So it's not just one, it's both of these things. And a lot of this also depends on the previous experiences of that person with harm or experiencing abuse, and in particular with those same individuals that they may encounter again. So is it going to be the same individuals or someone else? So as you can see, there's many factors to consider, as well as the factor, well, how likely is it that that person will show up there? So these are things to keep in mind when trying to figure out what you intend to do as an individual. So what I would suggest is that you talk about it with a professional who's either your counselor or your doctor, someone like a psychiatrist, or a close family member who knows you well enough to be able to assess the situation that you're in and the potential risks that you may be facing. You may not be able to talk to these people about this, so it might be something that you need to decide on your own. And even if you do get advice from these professionals, in the end, it's you who makes the decision. There might be some cases where the person has such severe mental health issues that they cannot depend upon their own decision-making processes. And in that case, I would suggest, well, follow the advice of someone that you really trust, someone who knows you, who knows your condition, and who knows what you are capable of or how you are capable of reacting in certain situations. Now, I want to add that it's not just people who have mental health issues who are filled with great anxiety or fear when it comes to bullying or treated badly, or even just general opposition. So I think most people in general are like that, and it's not just something that could take place at a Life Chain rally, but it's something that can happen anywhere. But I think you're right that especially at a Life Chain, people are worried about how others might view them if they are participating in a Life Chain. And I believe this is one of the reasons why some people don't come out. They might be very pro-life at heart, but they're worried, oh, somebody driving by might recognize me. And that's not good. So in other words, if they are afraid of people's opinions of them, more afraid of that than, of the judgment of God. In other words, we have an obligation to do what we can to promote justice in society and to oppose injustices in society, such as abortion. And if we have the potential to save lives by our public witness, then yes, we should do that. So don't forget that we are responsible not just for sins of commission, but also sins of omission. And sometimes sins of omission are failing to do the good that we could have done and should have done, such as, in some cases, participating in a life chain. So it's true that people are easily influenced by their peers, and it's not a good thing. And if you recall, I may have mentioned before that peer pressure isn't really so much your peers pressuring you to do something. Rather, peer pressure arises from within ourselves because of our desire to want to fit in with our peers, to be accepted by our peers, to be treated with respect and honor by our peers. And this is why we see this especially with young people. They start smoking because their peers start smoking, or they start doing drugs or becoming sexually active because the group that they hang out with, they're doing all these things. Or think, for example, why people swear. I'm sure that in most people's lives, there was never a group of people pressuring you to say, come on, you can say the bad word, come on, you can do it. No, people just start doing it on their own because they hear other people doing it and they think it's cool, or they think it's acceptable, or they think it's the way to fit in. So peer pressure is really from within. But our peer pressure should be not so much to fit in with human beings, but the real pressure within us should be our desire to fit in with God. Or think of the lives of the saints, to be like the saints, to imitate them, to be as they are. And yes, they had to be heroic, they had to be virtuous, and sometimes they had to do things that would cause great opposition to them. And in fact, with many saints, even St. Padre Pio, St. Jean-Marie Vianney, they were persecuted even by the church. So people thought they were just fakes or charlatans. They didn't really believe they were so holy. Padre Pio was forbidden to say public mass for a while. And I think there was some restriction placed on St. Jean-Marie Vianney also. So same as with John Bosco and so many other saints. So we need to do what God calls us to do. But yes, we have to have the capability of doing that. Someone who has mental health issues may not be capable, and that's just something that they need to consider. The best way to overcome fear in our lives, this fear of what our peers might think, is actually to confront our fears. In other words, if we know we should go to the life chain, but we're afraid because somebody driving by might recognize us, then we really should go. In the case of bullying, someone attacking you, and you have a good sense that that is very likely to happen, then I would say, yeah, maybe you need to avoid going if it's going to be too extreme and you think that you cannot handle it. So these are things to consider. When we give in to fear, fear debilitates us, keeps us from being able to do the good. And the more we give in to fear, the more fearful we become. It's kind of like a vicious circle. So when we give in to fear, it tends to inflate our fears even more, and it can debilitate us in other areas of our lives also. So God doesn't want us to be afraid of anything except of offending him. In other words, the thing that we should fear most is offending God by committing sin. Okay. Regarding the life chain, keep in mind that during this pandemic, if you do participate in the life chain, you would be wearing a mask. Now, if we're outside, you probably don't have to wear a mask. In some places, they're mandating that you do have to wear a mask. But you would be wearing a mask, and if you wanted to, you could also wear a hat. And if you've got a hat on and you pull it down low and you've got a mask on, it's very unlikely that people are going to recognize you. Now, granted, they still could, but it's just a reminder that you can kind of disguise yourselves during this pandemic. That's one of the I don't want to say advantages of the pandemic, but theoretically we could have way more people participating in the life chain who perhaps previously were afraid, but because they can wear a mask and cover themselves quite fully, they no longer need to be afraid. The other thing that you could do is come with a family member or a good friend who can act as a kind of moral support for you. In other words, if you're all alone and somebody bullies you, sure, that's going to be difficult. If you've got a friend, even if you're, distance from your friend, like 6 feet or 10 feet. We had set it up so that we would be spaced 10 feet during the last life chain. Your friend can come to your defense. And so you don't need to be afraid in that case. But once again, these are things that you need to consider for yourself. I had specifically suggested for the life chain that we line up along the road where the cars aren't stopped for the traffic light, but rather that we're on the other side. And this way, there's less likelihood of confrontation with passengers in the cars. In other words, they would just be driving by. So once they go through the green light, that's when they would be passing us as we're holding the sign. So this is what I had recommended, but the organizers ended up doing the opposite. So we actually ended up standing where the cars stop for a red light. So we didn't really have any confrontations this last time, but theoretically it's more likely to happen. People will roll down their window and start talking to you or calling you names or whatever it may be. And the other thing is that last year, we almost didn't have the life chain because I think, if I remember correctly, it was like you couldn't have more than 20 people gathering outside. And so we spread out at 4 corners of the intersection, actually further from the corners, so that it wouldn't be one gathering, but rather 4 different groups of people gathering for a good cause. And, right now the restriction is that you can't have 5 people gather together. Now, what this means is that you can't have 5 people socializing even outside. So if we're in a life chain, I don't think we're socializing. I think we're standing. We can stand more than 6 feet apart, 10 feet apart. We can even make it 12 feet apart. Having that good spacing. Last year, it looked much better, much more impressive, because we appeared to be much bigger because we were so well spread out. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. So I don't know if we'll be able to have it this year. Hopefully we can, and hopefully we can have more than just 5 people in one section. The reality is that because of this pandemic situation, all these restrictions by the government, a lot of people are saying that it's unjust. Some politicians and people are pointing out that the lockdowns are actually causing more harm, that they don't really stop the spread of the coronavirus, but they kind of prolong its presence in society. In other words, it takes even longer for herd immunity to be built up. So the point I'm trying to make is that we are losing our freedoms, including our ability to speak freely, to express our opinions. And this is going to affect the life chain. So all the more reason why we should take advantage and come out for the life chain when the opportunity does come up. Because eventually, like even now, you can't post certain things on YouTube. You're being censored, and this is not right. So we have a right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion also. And some people are very worried that these things, as time goes on, are going to be more and more suppressed, which is very, very unfortunate. So for those of you who are unable to make it to the life chain for whatever reason, I would suggest that you pray for all the participants, but pray also for those who are driving by. It's been pointed out that many people, or some women who were planning to have an abortion, saw the witness of the people in the life chain, and they changed their mind, had their child, and afterwards were so grateful that they sought out the organizers of the life chain to personally thank them. So I want to thank all of you who have previously participated in life chains, and I want to thank the person who wrote this question. And I'm sorry that you have certain issues, and like I said, you have to decide for yourself. And all of God's blessings to you, and hopefully you can join us. If not, I'm sure that you will be praying for us. Thank you, and God bless you.